Welcome to the Be More Objectivistic podcast, The Antidote to Collectivism. Our podcast was created for the curious listener who has heard the word objectivism, but is unsure what it means, where it comes from, or why it matters. You do not need a background in philosophy to listen to our podcast episodes. Every concept is explained in plain language, with practical examples drawn from history and the present day. Objectivism is, at its core, a philosophy of life. It asks, what is real? How do we know it? What is the good life? How should people live together? These questions are not dusty academic abstractions. They are the very questions that drive political movements, shape economies, and determine whether civilizations flourish or collapse. Are you ready to begin? Okay, let's go. Thinkers and allies. Philosophers and authors associated with objectivism. While Ayn Rand is objectivism's founder and primary voice, a rich constellation of thinkers either directly developed her philosophy, deeply influenced it, or arrived independently at compatible conclusions. This chapter profiles the most important of them. Nathaniel Branden, 1930 to 2014. Psychologist, objectivist theorist, author. Born Nathan Blumenthal in Ontario, Canada, Branden discovered the fountainhead at 16 and wrote Rand a letter that began one of the most consequential intellectual partnerships in modern philosophy. He became Rand's closest philosophical collaborator and, notoriously, her romantic partner, a relationship that ended in dramatic rupture in 1968. Before the break, Branden co-founded the Nathaniel Branden Institute in New York, 1958, which brought objectivism to thousands through lectures and correspondence courses. His foundational contribution was developing the objectivist psychology of self-esteem, the idea that rational self-evaluation and psychological health are intertwined. Key works. The Psychology of Self-Esteem, 1969, argues that self-esteem, confidence in one's mind and one's worth, is the foundation of psychological health and ethical functioning. Enormously influential in both objectivist and mainstream psychology. The Six Pillars of Self-Esteem, 1994, his mature synthesis, widely used by therapists worldwide. Honoring the Self, 1983, explores self-assertion, personal responsibility, and individual dignity. Leonard Peikoff, 1933, present. Philosopher, heir to Rand's intellectual estate. A Canadian-American philosopher, Peikoff met Rand in 1951 and became her most devoted student and intellectual heir. She designated him executor of her estate. He is the only person Rand herself identified as a fully developed objectivist philosopher, and he is widely considered the foremost living authority on objectivism. Key works. The Ominous Parallels, 1982, a sweeping philosophical history arguing that the cultural and philosophical trends that led to Nazi Germany are being replicated in modern America. Foreword by Ayn Rand. Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, 1991, the definitive, systematic textbook of objectivism, covering all four branches in rigorous detail. The standard academic reference. The DM Hypothesis, 2012, a novel theory categorizing modes of integration in philosophy, culture, education, and politics. Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC. Ancient Greek philosopher, foundational influence. Rand famously named only 3 thinkers in history as direct influences: Aristotle, Hugo, and Mises, with Aristotle towering above the rest. She called him the greatest philosopher in history and the direct ancestor of Objectivism. His influence on her system is pervasive and explicit. From Aristotle, Objectivism draws the law of identity, A is A, the primacy of logic, the correspondence theory of truth, the doctrine of individual substance over Platonic universals, and the naturalistic ethics of eudaimonia, flourishing or well-being. Aristotle was the first systematic philosopher to ground morality in human nature rather than divine command or abstract duty. Relevant works: Nicomachean Ethics, the foundational text of virtue ethics and the good life for man as a rational animal. Metaphysics, the defense of the law of identity and the primacy of existence. Organon, logical writings, the first systematic science of deductive reasoning. Ludwig von Mises, 1881 to 1973. Austrian economist, champion of free markets. Though not an objectivist himself, the Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises was Rand's economic mentor and is frequently cited in her nonfiction. Mises developed praxeology, the study of human action, and provided the most rigorous technical proof that socialism is economically impossible. Mises escaped Nazi-occupied Europe and settled in the United States, where he spent the last decades of his life at New York University. He is widely considered one of the most important economists of the 20th century. Key works: Socialism, 1922, the definitive economic demolition of socialist planning, arguing that without price signals from free markets, rational economic calculation is impossible. The famous socialist calculation problem. Human Action, 1949, his magnum opus, a comprehensive treatise on economics built from first principles of human action and voluntary exchange. The Anti-Capitalistic Mentality, 1956, a psychological and sociological examination of why intellectuals tend to resent and attack capitalism. Friedrich Hayek, 1899 to 1992, Austrian-British economist and political philosopher. Friedrich August von Hayek, Nobel laureate in economics, 1974, is perhaps the most influential liberal economist of the 20th century. While Hayek's philosophical foundations differ from Rand's in important ways, he was more agnostic and less rationalist. His conclusions about markets, freedom, and the danger of central planning closely parallel Objectivism's political philosophy. His concept of the knowledge problem, that no central planner can possess the dispersed, local knowledge that millions of individuals possess and act on in free markets, is one of the most powerful arguments ever made for capitalism and against socialist planning. Key works. The Road to Serfdom, 1944, argued that central economic planning inevitably leads to political totalitarianism, regardless of the planner's good intentions. A bestseller in both Britain and America, it transformed public debate. The Constitution of Liberty, 1960, a systematic philosophical defense of classical liberalism and individual freedom. The Fatal Conceit, 1988, his final major work, arguing that socialism is a fatal conceit, the mistaken belief that a central authority can design and manage a complex social order better than spontaneous human cooperation. Milton Friedman, 1912 to 2006. American economist, Nobel laureate. The University of Chicago economist Milton Friedman was the 20th century's most effective popularizer of free market economics. A Nobel laureate, 1976, he served as an advisor to Presidents Nixon and Reagan and advised the governments of Chile, Israel, and Iceland. While not an objectivist, his defense of economic freedom is powerfully compatible with objectivist politics. Key works. Capitalism and Freedom, 1962, argues that economic freedom is the precondition of political freedom and that most government interventions are counterproductive. Free to Choose, 1980, with Rose Friedman, the companion book to the landmark PBS television series. A powerful, accessible case for free markets aimed at the general reader. A Monetary History of the United States, 1963, his scholarly masterwork, arguing that the Federal Reserve's policy mistakes caused and deepened the Great Depression. Thomas Jefferson, 1743 to 1826. Founding father, political philosopher, statesman. Thomas Jefferson is not an objectivist philosopher, but his political framework, individual natural rights, limited government, separation of powers, and the right of revolution against tyranny, is the historical instantiation of many objectivist political principles. Rand considered the American founding, particularly the Declaration of Independence, the closest any real society had come to establishing a government consistent with individual rights. Key works. The Declaration of Independence, 1776, the foundational political document of the United States, asserting the self-evident truths of individual rights, government by consent, and the right to alter or abolish governments that fail their purpose. Notes on the State of Virginia, 1785, his most systematic political and philosophical writing. The Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, 1786, a landmark defense of intellectual freedom. John Locke, 1632 to 1704. English philosopher, father of classical liberalism. John Locke is the intellectual grandfather of both classical liberalism and American constitutionalism. His theory of natural rights, life, liberty, and property, derived from the nature of the individual as a rational, self-owning being, directly influenced Jefferson and the founders. While Locke grounded rights in God and Rand in reason, their conclusions about the proper limits of government are strikingly similar. Key works. Two Treatises of Government, 1689, the foundational text of liberal political philosophy, arguing against absolute monarchy and for the consent of the governed. An essay concerning human understanding, 1689, his epistemological masterwork, arguing that all knowledge derives from sense experience. Isabel Patterson, 1886 to 1961. Author, literary critic, political thinker. Isabel Patterson was a Canadian-American novelist and literary critic who was one of Rand's closest intellectual friends in her early American years. Along with Rand and Rose Wilder Lane, she is credited as one of the founding mothers of the modern American libertarian movement. Her combination of rigorous individualism, historical learning, and moral seriousness deeply influenced Rand. Key works: The God of the Machine, 1943, a sweeping philosophical history arguing that human energy, specifically the creative, industrious individual, is the true engine of civilization, and that collectivism is a short circuit that destroys it. Rose Wilder Lane, 1886 to 1968. Author and political thinker. Daughter of Laura Ingalls Wilder, Rose Wilder Lane was one of the most prominent American libertarian thinkers of the mid-20th century. Her personal journey from communist sympathizer to passionate individualist gave her writing a moral urgency that resonated with Rand's generation. Key works: The Discovery of Freedom, 1943, a stirring history of human freedom, arguing that individual liberty, not collective organization, is the source of all human progress. Thank you for listening to our Be More Objectivistic podcast episode. In an era of surging collectivism, government expansion, and ideological conformity, understanding objectivism has never been more urgent. Whether you are a student, a professional, an entrepreneur, or simply a citizen trying to make sense of the world, our podcast episodes give you a foundation, clear, logical, and grounded in reality, for thinking about freedom, morality, and the future of human civilization.